Chapter 23. "Why did you choose me?" asked Jennifer Cedar. "I can tell you're the kind of person who is strong," replied Michael. "You remind me of someone very dear to me." "Strong?" said Jennifer in surprise. "I wasn't the one who defeated a demon." "No," laughed Michael, "but traveling through time is not the only ability I possess." "What else can you do?" asked Jennifer. "Well, I have the ability to see possible futures," said Michael. "Possible futures?" asked Jennifer. "So that's what you meant about saving the world. You're going to try to change time and stop the Earth from being pulled away from the sun." "Well, when you say it like that, it sounds so simple," said Michael with a smile. "It's more complicated?" asked Jennifer. "I'm afraid so," replied Michael. "It's not just a matter of changing something in the past. Time is bound by forces. It's like gravity." "Time is like gravity?" asked Jennifer. Michael picked up a stone and threw it up into the air. A few moments later it fell on the ground. "You can try to move things away from its reach, but it pulls them back," replied Michael. "So we can't change the past?" asked Jennifer. "It might be possible," said Michael. "Imagine if instead of throwing a stone away, we threw the earth." "What? Wouldn't that also be throwing the stone?" asked Jennifer. "Okay, the analogy is not perfect, but the idea is that with a tremendous amount of force, it might be possible to get gravity to pull everything a different direction," said Michael. "What would be strong enough to do that?" asked Jennifer. "I have a plan. It's a bit complicated," said Michael, "and I will need your help." "My help?" asked Jennifer. "What will I be able to do? I don't have flaming swords and time travel." "I'm going to give you a part of me," said Michael, "and with it, you will gain the ability to time travel." "Wait, what?" asked Jennifer as she raised an eyebrow. "Your job will be to find others who are able to use my other abilities," said Michael, ignoring her question. "Eventually, you will find me again." He turned and looked away as though he could see something that no one else could. "Wait, what?" asked Victor as he turned to Ben. They had been passively watching the conversation, but Michael's statement sent a shiver down his spine. "Yes, that's partly you," said Ben. "You are the chosen one of the Archangel Michael. Pieces of him remain in each of the keys, and they all recognize you." "I'm not an angel," said Victor as he shook his head in disbelief. "I was born to human parents. My name is Victor Lee." "All of that is true, but it is also true that you have been chosen by the Archangel to finish his grand design," said Ben. Victor's mouth hung open in disbelief. The conversation between Jennifer and Michael caught his attention again. "This is important, Jennifer," said Michael as he pointed to the sky. Jennifer watched a glowing dot in the heavens grow brighter and brighter. "That is the Archdemon. I'm going to have a battle with him." "Will you defeat him?" asked Jennifer. "No, I am not that powerful," said Michael with a smile. "But I will bind him for 1,000 years. That will be your point of reference. Travel through time and find others who will be able to help wield my abilities. Eventually, you will find me again." "I thought you were going to imprison him," said Jennifer. "Well, yes, but that will require that I sacrifice my life," said Michael with a smile. "Sacrifice your life?" shouted Jennifer. "Do not act surprised," said Michael. "A person cannot purchase redemption for the world on a whim. It comes with a high price." "I don't want you to pay that price," said Jennifer as tears welled up in her eyes. "The Archdemon sacrifices unwilling victims in large numbers to increase and maintain his power," said Michael. "But the thing he does not and cannot comprehend is the power of a willing sacrifice. So that's the source of power in the divine keys, whispered Victor to Ben with wide eyes. You understand, said Ben solemnly. But you said it would not be enough to defeat him, objected Jennifer. Not immediately, said Michael. This is only a start. Humanity is more valuable than you could possibly realize, and though there are some who will walk dark paths, there will be others who understand what is at stake. Some will betray those they call friends, but others will stand by their precious allies with fierce loyalty. What had been a small dot in the sky had transformed to a blazing ball of fire, falling toward them. Jennifer did not seem to notice it, but Victor did. He set humanity up to fail, whispered Victor. Did he? Asked Ben. Victor shook his head. You never saw what happened, said Victor. Humanity bought into the cult that sought to revive its own enslavement under the archdemon. There were hundreds of demon worshippers. I did see that happen, said Ben. When the destroyer spun the world on its side, and only a small zone was habitable, humanity turned on itself with cruel experimentation in search of augmentation, and the religion of survival of the fittest reigned, said Victor. That is true, said Ben, but it also went to produce individuals such as Siegfried West, Lucas Flynn, Kirana Sepharvaim, Jonathan Knight, and Stephanie Mason. And even those that had embraced demon worship or augment philosophy were not permanently lost. Think of Ulysses Carter or Row 82. A handful of people in a horde of demons and machines, said Victor sadly. That's the difference, said Ben. Did you ever wonder why the Archdemon's hand was so anxious to get divine key bearers? Did it not cross your mind as to why they called you ultimate human sacrifices? You're saying that's true? Thundered Victor. That makes us no different than the augments, who consider themselves the fittest, or the demon worshippers who believe they are more worthy of power. You misunderstand, said Ben. It is your willingness to sacrifice that gives you power. Your concern for others is not a weakness, and your desire to make the world better, that makes you worthy. Victor did not know what to say. There was something firm and calm in Ben's voice that stirred passion in Victor's heart. Suddenly he was interrupted as a huge meteor collided with the earth. Dust and debris flew into the air. Victor shielded his face, but found that the dirt and stones in the air passed harmlessly through him. After a few minutes he was able to see a golden shield that surrounded Michael and Jennifer. That's the Archdemon, isn't it? Asked Victor as he saw a cloud of darkness ooze out of the crater that the impact had created. Ben nodded with a frown. But the Archangel is about to sacrifice all of his power to give humanity a fighting chance. Dark fire erupted from the mass and collided with Michael's golden shield. Jennifer screamed as Michael rushed toward the towering monstrosity that had come to enslave Earth. It became difficult to see exactly what was happening as the Archangel and the Archdemon battled one another. There were shouts and roars, and the earth trembled as fire and wind swirled about the battling titans. "What's happening?" shouted Victor as he tried to make himself heard over the tumult. "Just watch," shouted Ben in reply. Suddenly the sound of a horrifying shriek filled the air, and a massive clawed hand landed next to Jennifer. She shuddered with horror as she looked at the large, dusty claws. Suddenly Michael landed on the ground next to them. Jennifer rushed to him. Blood oozed out of his mouth, and dust stuck to his skin. He slowly rolled over and got to his feet. "Michael!" screamed Jennifer. "It's okay," he called back as he forced a smile and rushed back into the swirling fire with his own burning blade. Shrieks echoed, and the earth shook again as the battle raged on. Finally, Michael flew out of the flames and landed on the ground, skidding for several feet. "Michael!" screamed Jennifer. This time Michael was slower to get up. Blood oozed out of dozens of lacerations on his body and trickled out of his mouth down his chin. Jennifer covered her mouth in horror as she ran to him. "Jennifer," he called out, "I'm about ready." "Ready for what?" cried Jennifer. "Ready to seal him up," said Michael as he gasped for breath. "I just need one more thing. Come close." Jennifer came up to Michael. He pulled the remnants of the chain from the shackles that were still bound to her legs and sliced through them using his burning blade. Jennifer jumped back with a start. Michael sliced through the metal until he had constructed 10 heaps of roughly equal size. "Is he?" gasped Victor. "Yes," said Ben. "He is forging the divine keys." "I always thought they would be made of some precious or rare material," said Victor. "They are," said Ben. "The metal may be common, but the pieces of his soul that he is imprinting on them are unique." Victor watched as he placed his hands over each heap of metal. His fingers suppressed the glow of an intensely bright light. When he lifted his hands, a familiar key with a mirrored surface lay where the heap of metal had been. Jennifer and Victor watched with wide eyes until he had placed his hands on the last heap. Suddenly a dark tendril flew from the swirling black flames near the impact crater. It pulled him toward the blaze. "Michael!" cried Jennifer as she rushed to pull him back. Michael sliced through the tendril and rushed back toward the heap of metal he had left behind. Jennifer picked it up and tried to hand it to him as another tendril wrapped around his wounded body. He strained against it as Jennifer raced toward him. Michael's face turned red from exertion as he resisted the pull of the archdemon. At last Jennifer reached Michael. He grabbed the handful of metal chunks from her. "Return to me when this is over," said Michael. "I will," said Jennifer. Michael turned as though he were speaking to someone else and was surprised that Jennifer had answered. He smiled as light shined from between his fingers. "Why not just find something else if it's just a bunch of metal?" asked Victor as Michael was dragged out of sight. "Jennifer risked her life to bring it to him," said Ben. "That act instilled power into it, and that was the key that needed power most of all." "That's your key?" asked Victor. Ben nodded. There was a huge flash of light. As violent as the wind had been that had come at them from the archdemon, the rush of wind that pulled them toward him was even more violent. Jennifer fell on the ground and skidded toward it. She struggled to grab hold of something that would prevent her from getting sucked into the battle, but any hold she found was quickly pulled out of the earth. Finally, a big blast of air pushed everything backward again. Jennifer hit her head against the ground and lost consciousness as she skidded back toward the keys. Victor, immune to the debris, watched in shock and awe as a huge crystal prison formed around the archdemon, and it flew through the air toward the south. Victor knew what would happen to the archdemon at this point. He knew it would land near the South Pole. He knew it would be buried under centuries of ice. He knew that the cult of the archdemon would engineer a secret human sacrifice of hundreds of people in order to create a destroyer that would liberate him from his prison. He did not know what this had to do with Molly Patterson's betrayal. "The hand over there," said Ben as he pointed to the large claw that Michael had chopped off of the archdemon. "It is the archdemon's hand." "So the black keys were made from that?" asked Victor. "Yes," said Ben. "It was found by Sarah Hawkins. She was actually watching from the other side." "Was that the beginning of the cult that tried to free the archdemon?" asked Victor. No, said Ben, but it was the beginning of a problem that led Molly Patterson to betray me. What happened? Asked Victor. Ben's expression grew solemn and the world began to spin. Victor tried to fight the nausea as he fell on his hands and knees. After a moment, the spinning stopped. Victor slowly got to his feet and looked around to see a younger version of Ben walking slowly along a seashore. I was recruited, said Ben. The sound of the waves crashing on the shore and tumbling back into the sea soothed Victor, and he breathed deeply. What is this place? Asked Victor as he looked around and noticed green trees on the hills in the distance near the shore. It is near the city of Vera Cruz, Mexico, said Ben. What were you doing here? Asked Victor. Mourning the loss of my wife, said Ben. Victor noticed the puffiness in the eyes of the younger version of Ben. I'm so sorry, said Victor. The accident was not your fault, said Ben, but thank you for your sympathy. The younger version of Ben suddenly stopped walking. He tilted his head and looked at the sand. At the time, I thought my life had lost its purpose. I was searching for something to fill the void in my heart, and that's when I heard a voice. The younger Ben moved again and then stopped. I didn't hear anything, said Victor. Listen, said Ben. Victor stopped and tried to still his breathing. He strained his ears, hoping to hear something. Suddenly he became aware of a faint ringing. The younger version of Ben rushed toward the source of the sound. It seemed to be coming from under the moist sand. He knelt down and began pulling large handfuls of sand up as he dug his way into the earth. The water rushed in and filled the hole he had created and nullified most of the work he had done, but he persisted. Eventually he caught a glimpse of bright light being reflected off of something in the dirt. Ben dug all around it and pulled out a handful of sand. He let the water of the sea wash the excess sand off and reveal his discovery. It was a shining mirrored key. The 10th key, said Victor. Yes, replied Ben as they watched the younger version of Ben stare at it for a moment more. At the time I did not understand everything I was intended to do. I only knew that Michael had sacrificed greatly to ensure that this key was made, and that it was critical to fighting the archdemon. How did you know to go north? Asked Victor. The key gave me a vision of Michael's battle with the archdemon and the resulting prison being thrown to the south, said Ben. It was a bit vague, but I thought I might be able to find Jennifer Cedar. The beach began swirling around as Victor's vision took him across time and space. He was about to fall over when Ben caught him by the wrist and helped him up. Everything became still as they appeared near a familiar lake surrounded by trees. It was the same lake where the eastern shrine had been built, but as Victor looked around, there was no shrine. Instead, there was a sad-looking woman walking along the lake's edge. Victor watched as another version of Ben walked past them toward the lake. This version of Ben looked identical to the one guiding Victor in his vision. How long did it take you to find the Council of Nine? Asked Victor as he noticed the age difference. 10 years, said Ben, and I didn't find all the council. I only found her, the woman I trusted, the woman I loved, the woman who killed me because of what I wanted to do. Molly Patterson.